Most Americans will spend over 4 decades working. They start in their early 20s, follow a predictable path of income, expenses, and slow savings, and eventually hope to retire somewhere in their 60s. That's the default script, but every once in a while, you hear a completely different story. Someone who didn't wait 40 years, someone who compressed that entire journey into just 5. It sounds extreme, almost unrealistic, and for most people, it is. But instead of dismissing it, the real question is this: what does the math actually say? Because financial freedom is not magic, and it's not motivation, it's numbers. So instead of opinions, we're going to follow a real scenario and break it down step by step. Let's call him Alex. He's 27 years old, living in the United States, earning $90,000 a year, with about $8,000 in savings, no special advantages, no inheritance, just a solid middle-class income and a growing awareness that he doesn't want to work forever. His goal is simple, but aggressive. He wants to become financially free in 5 years. Not rich, not flashy, just free. Free enough that his investments can cover his life expenses indefinitely. To figure out if that's possible, the first step is defining what free actually means in numbers. Alex calculates his yearly expenses carefully: rent, groceries, insurance, transportation, healthcare, and a small buffer for unexpected costs. After trimming unnecessary spending, he realizes he can live on about $32,000 per year without feeling deprived. That number becomes the foundation of everything, because in the world of financial independence, there's a rule that drives the math. Multiply your annual expenses by 25. This comes from the idea that you can withdraw about 4% of your investments each year without running out of money over time. So for Alex, $32,000 multiplied by 25 gives him a target of $800,000. Now the challenge becomes clear. He's starting with $8,000 and needs to reach $800,000 in just 5 years. That's not a small increase. That's a 100x jump. And there are only 3 ways to get there: earn more, spend less, and invest wisely. Income, expenses, and returns. Those are the only levers in this game. In the first year, Alex focuses on the most immediate lever he can control, which is his spending. He decides to push his savings rate as high as possible. While most people save somewhere between 10% and 20% of their income, Alex sets a target of 70%. That decision alone completely changes how he lives. He moves out of his 1-bedroom apartment and into a shared space, cutting his rent nearly in half. He sells his car and switches to public transportation and occasional ride sharing. He cancels subscriptions, reduces eating out, and becomes extremely intentional with every purchase. His lifestyle becomes simple, efficient, and focused. After taxes, his take-home income is about $68,000. 2. Maintain a 70% savings rate. He limits his spending to around $20,000 for the entire year. That's less than $1,700 per month. It's not comfortable by typical American standards, but it's not impossible either. It's temporary, and it's strategic. By the end of year 1, Alex has saved aggressively and invested consistently, including modest market returns. His portfolio grows to roughly $60,000. At first, this feels like a huge win. Going from $8,000 to $60,000 in 1 year is significant progress. But when he compares it to his $800,000 goal, a different reality sets in. He's made progress, but he's still far away. And this is where most people hit a wall, because they realize something important. You can only cut expenses so much. There's a limit to how little you can spend, but there's no real limit to how much you can earn. And that realization shifts his entire strategy. In year 2, Alex stops focusing only on saving money and starts focusing on making more of it. He begins by evaluating his current job. After researching salaries for similar roles in his field, he realizes he's slightly underpaid. He prepares for a negotiation, gathers data, and makes his case. The result is a 10% raise, bringing his salary closer to $100,000. It's a solid improvement, but it's not enough to transform his situation on its own. So he goes further. He starts investing in new skills that are in high demand. He focuses on areas that can directly increase his earning potential, like data analysis, automation tools, and project management certifications. He studies consistently after work, builds a portfolio, and positions himself for better opportunities. Within less than a year, that effort pays off. He switches jobs and lands a new role, paying $115,000 per year. At the same time, he begins building a second stream of income. He starts freelancing based on his professional skills. In the beginning, it's inconsistent and small, just a few $100s here and there, but over time, it becomes more stable. By the end of the year, he's earning an additional $2,000 to $3,000 per month outside of his main job. Now his total income has increased dramatically. Between his salary and freelance work, he's bringing in close to $150,000 per year. But here's the key difference. He doesn't upgrade his lifestyle. He doesn't move to a nicer apartment or buy a better car. He keeps his expenses almost exactly the same as the previous year. That decision multiplies the impact of his income growth. With a much higher income and controlled expenses, his savings rate climbs to over 80%. That means the majority of everything he earns is being invested. And this is where the numbers start to accelerate. By the end of year 2, Alex's portfolio grows to approximately $140,000. This is the point where something important changes. In the beginning, all the progress came from his effort, his discipline, his decisions. But now, a portion of the growth is coming from the investments themselves. Even with normal market returns, his money is starting to generate its own momentum. And while $140,000 is still far from $800,000, it's no longer just a distant idea, it's a trajectory. At the same time, there's a shift in perspective. When Alex first started, the goal was very clear and very rigid. Reach $800,000 in 5 years and stop working completely. But now, after 2 years of intense focus, he starts to see something different. He realizes that financial freedom is not just a single finish line. It's a spectrum. There are stages along the way that already change your life. Even if you haven't reached the final number, he notices that with $140,000 invested, he has something he didn't have before, which is flexibility. If something goes wrong at work, he's not immediately in trouble. If he wants to switch jobs, he can take that risk. If he needs time off, he has a buffer. The pressure is lower, even though he's not fully independent yet. And this leads to a deeper question. What if the real goal isn't to fully retire in 5 years, but to reach a point where work becomes optional in a different way? What if the value isn't in hitting the exact number, but in how much control you gain along the journey? Because at this point, Alex is still far from $800,000. The math is still challenging. The timeline is still aggressive, but something fundamental has already changed. He's no longer dependent in the same way he was before. And that's where the story begins to shift. Because the next phase isn't just about growth. It's about risk, uncertainty, and whether the 5-year timeline can actually hold up under real market conditions. By the start of year 3, Alex has done almost everything right. He reduced his expenses, increased his income, and consistently invested the difference. On paper, he's ahead of where most people would ever get in a decade. His portfolio is sitting at around $140,000. And for the first time, it feels real. Not just an idea, not just a plan, but something tangible. But this is also the phase where the game quietly changes. Because up until now, progress was mostly controlled. His savings rate was predictable. His income was increasing. His behavior was disciplined. But from this point forward, something else starts to matter more than anything he can directly control. And that is time combined with market behavior. Because when your timeline is only 5 years, you don't have the luxury of averages. Everyone likes to talk about average returns, 8%, 9%, maybe 10% per year. But averages only work over long periods. Over 20 or 30 years, the market smooths out. Over 5 years, it doesn't. You could have multiple strong years in a row, or you could hit a downturn at the worst possible moment, and when your entire plan depends on a short window, that uncertainty becomes a major risk. At this point, Alex discovers a concept that completely reframes his journey, and that is Coast Financial Independence. The idea is simple, but powerful. If you invest enough money early, you can reach a point where you no longer need to contribute to your investments, and they will still grow to a full retirement number on their own over time. So Alex runs the numbers. If his $140,000 grows at an average of 8% per year for the next 30 years, without adding another dollar, it could grow to well over $1 million. That realization changes everything, because it means that even if he never hits his 5-year goal, he has already bought himself something incredibly valuable, which is time. Instead of being forced to save aggressively for the next 30 years like most people, he has front-loaded the effort. He has created a situation where the future is already partially handled. And this is where the definition of success begins to shift again. Because originally, success meant hitting $800,000 in 5 years. But now, there's another version of success available. A version where he can slow down, reduce pressure, and still end up financially secure later in life. But Alex doesn't stop. He decides to continue pushing toward the original goal. Even if the probability is uncertain, year 3 becomes a continuation of the same strategy: high income, controlled expenses, and aggressive investing. His income remains strong at around $150,000, and he maintains a savings rate close to 80%. By the end of the year, with contributions and moderate market growth, his portfolio climbs to roughly $230,000. At this point, everything still looks good. The trajectory is upward, the discipline is consistent, and the momentum is there. But what he doesn't control, what happens next? Because entering year 4, the environment changes. The market doesn't move in a straight line. And this is where a concept called sequence of returns risk becomes real. Sequence risk is not about the average return you get. It's about when you get those returns. If you experience strong returns early in your journey, your portfolio benefits significantly. But if you experience losses early, especially when your balance is still relatively small, it can delay your progress in a way that's difficult to recover from within a short timeline. In Alex's case, year 4 begins with a downturn. The market drops by around 15%. His $230,000 portfolio takes a noticeable hit. On paper, it falls by more than $30,000. That's not just a number, it's months of effort, erased in a short period of time. And even though he continues investing, even though he doesn't panic and sell, the timeline starts to stretch. This is the path no one talks about when they promote the idea of fast financial freedom, because the math assumes smooth growth, but reality rarely behaves that way. Volatility is normal, but when your timeline is compressed, volatility becomes dangerous. Alex stays consistent. He keeps investing, keeps earning, keeps saving. By the end of year 4, the market partially recovers, and his portfolio reaches around $315,000. That's still progress, but it's not the kind of progress he would need to stay on track for the original 5-year goal. And now the gap becomes very clear. Going into year 5, Alex does the math again. He has roughly $315,000 invested. His target is $800,000. That means he needs to more than double his money in 1 year. Even if he continues contributing aggressively, even if he adds another $100,000 through savings, he would still need an unrealistic return to close the gap. And this is where the illusion breaks, because to achieve that kind of return in a single year, he would have to take extreme risks, speculative investments, high volatility assets. Essentially, he would have to gamble. And that's not investing anymore, that's hoping. So he makes a decision. He chooses not to chase the number at any cost. He sticks to his original principles: disciplined investing, controlled risk, and long-term thinking. By the end of year 5, his portfolio reaches approximately $450,000 to $470,000, depending on market conditions. On paper, he failed his goal. He did not reach $800,000. He did not become fully financially independent in 5 years. But calling this a failure misses the entire point, because the outcome is still extraordinary. At 32 years old, Alex now has nearly $500,000 invested. If he continues to invest at a moderate pace, he could reach full financial independence in his late 30s or early 40s, even if he stops investing completely and just lets his money grow. He is on track to become financially secure decades earlier than the average person. But more importantly, his life has already changed. He has options, he has flexibility, he has control over his time in a way that most people never experience until much later in life, if at all. And that leads to the final realization, which is that the 5-year goal was never really about the exact number. It was about direction. It was about forcing a level of focus and discipline that most people never apply. Because even though the timeline didn't hold perfectly, the transformation did. The savings rate mattered more than the income at the start. Then income became the multiplier that accelerated everything. And throughout the entire journey, consistency mattered more than perfection. Not every year was ideal. Not every return was positive. But the overall direction stayed intact. The biggest takeaway is not that you can retire in 5 years. For most people, that's unlikely. The real takeaway is that compressing your financial timeline, even if you don't fully achieve it, can still give you back decades of your life. Because in the end, financial freedom is not a single finish line. It's a spectrum, and every step you take toward it reduces dependence, increases control, and changes how you experience your time. And once you understand that, the question is no longer whether 5 years is enough. The question becomes how much of your life you can take back if you start now.